Judah, how can a catalyst impact a technical setup? Are there ever times where a negative catalyst can ruin a good looking chart? Or on the flip side, times where a really positive catalyst can give new life to an otherwise downtrending chart that looks like it's down in the dumps?
I'll show some examples afterwards, but I mean, there definitely are times where a catalyst can change the direction of a good looking trend, either to the downside or upside. I mean, usually it's through biotech. If a stock looks really good and they announce bad results, that stock could go from a great looking trend to a horrific stock that you would never take, until it recovers. And I mean, vice versa. There are times where stocks are fading, and I see this a lot. Earnings comes out, or the news has to be really positive. Mostly, I see this off, positive earnings or positive results on biotech. But generally, it's that gap up on massive volume and news, and that's typically what changes a trend is news. So, for example, IMUX, we have a nice gap here on well than above average volume. It gaps up on news over prior resistance, pretty much closing this gap from June. And I mean, this thing continues on to double. And, on this day here, you're thinking like, okay, maybe, it could go sideways for another few weeks or months set up and have another like higher. Then one morning you get this press release on biotech results and the stock gaps down 80%.
What are some mistakes that you think that newer or less experienced traders make when it comes to technical analysis and using it to make informed trading decisions?
So I think many hold on for too long. I think they believe that once the stock breaks out, it has to continue going. And they don't properly come in with a good risk reward plan. It hits the alert, they buy it, no matter how much it's been up, no matter where it's coming from or how the actual chart looks. I mean, they just get in, they hope for the best, and they don't really look at, what the stock has done in the past and where it may find trouble. And I think that, many traders just believe that these things are going to work just because it hit an alert.
Judah, would it be possible to review a couple trades or charts to get your analysis and your perception of trades and technical analysis?
Yeah, I could share my screen. All right, so this is my setup. This is what I look at every day. I could go over all this later and what everything means to me and how I show up to the markets and how I keep in touch with the markets. But I just want to go over a few setups. These over here are the setups that I want to review. They are my positions. They're just here for the sake of the video. And I wanted to start off with Coinbase because of like the massive move that it has made this past few weeks since ER. And I mean, this chart has been on radar since this day here. I had it on radar at the time. Bitcoin was looking really well. It was looking good for a breakout. And once Coinbase announced earnings on this day here and it gapped up over this level, I wrote an IU that I think this thing could go to 114. And how I got to 114 was pretty much off this bigger level here. If you zoom out, go to the weekly, you could see how big this 114, 113.50 level is for the stock. So that's how I got to the exact level of 114 and how I got to that move from where we were, which is in the low 80s, was pretty much based off what it's done in the past and how the stock moves. You could see based on the history that the stock has pretty clean big moves as it breaks out of these little pivot areas. And I mean, here we are. If this thing on this day here, as it was breaking 114, I actually noted that if we, build above 114, we could see 150, 200. Like this thing has been in a what year and a half long base. We're finally breaking out, and if you look, you could see these levels. I mean, not much resistance until these areas here. So this is something, that we had on watch from down here. And, this is why I think using moving averages is a great way, to use as a stop loss, is because you'd still be in this if you had taken it on the earnings day. Another great setup that I just want to point out is back here. And this is basically combining the two news and breaking out of a trend line. We have this long base after this big move, and they have this, this news announcement, and whether or not it's big doesn't really matter. It broke through my trend line, it hit alerts, it had news, and this thing has just gone straight up since. Tesla is another one. This hit alerts today. And I mean, if you look how tight this thing has gotten on this daily, this is pretty much what I look for. There's not much momentum here. More momentum is back during COVID times, but like this is still trading within a range. Like if you look at it, there's not much momentum. They do have these little pocket pivots and these little potential setups that you still can trade, and I do trade. This hit alert here as it broke out at like 237. I believe it's here, 237.62. What you do is you take it as it breaks the high of day using the low of day as a stop loss. And this happened to stop out, but then you see how this reclaims green, reclaims VWAP, and that's why it's important to reset those alerts, because it re-hit alerts, which I set a little bit higher, but those hit alerts, and I mean this move alone, has been pretty decent. If you look at it, I mean this setup here kind of looked like Coinbase in the other example. You have that move, you have this channel, you have a little breakout through it. But if you see, like, this kind of also moves the way Coinbase does. I mean, you have a move, you have this channel and breakout. And if you look at it at a bigger picture, you could see that what's going on here is pretty much what was going on here on a bigger scale. So you have this big move, you have this channel, this breakout, big move, channel. Like, I mean, I thought we were going to test this level earlier, but I think that we do continue to move up and test like 250 to 252.
Mm-hmm.
If it does break out, I think this thing could go a lot higher to 270s, 300. So this is something that you could trade it intraday, but I mean there's so much more potential if you just get in and ride these things up. As long as you have your risk. I mean, like, what is there to be afraid of? I know a lot of people don't like to swing trade because they're afraid, or because they think that they could rotate their money faster. But this could be 10% of your account. You still have 90% of your account to trade elsewhere. You let this thing work for you. You don't have to worry as much, as sitting in a trade for 10% or a potential 30% loss. Netflix, I mean, this is a slow moving stock. I mean, nobody should really be taking this. The ADR is 1.6. Usually you don't want to trade anything under 4 or 5 unless you have a really massive account. But this at the time was just something that was pretty relatively strong given the market. Like the market was, I think, on this day here. And Netflix was putting in this range, and this is what we talked about before, of a pretty bad setup that gets revived by catalyst or news. This over here doesn't look too great. But then earnings come out, this thing gaps up, puts in this nice little range here, and then we gap up through this trend line on news. And whether this news matters or not, I don't know, but this was something that hit alerts, something that was on radar from one of these days here. But I mean, we were prepared for this. And I mean, it's been straight up since. Roblox was another that was on watch at the same time. Those three were put in the same like kind of watch list basket. This was a little more difficult because we had earnings on this day. So whether or not you hold into earnings, I personally don't like to unless there's good cushion. But I mean, this was another one that just looked really good. Like it's gone from 25 to 32. It's consolidated. It's gone very tight. It started piercing alerts here, and then we had this gap up. Small move, but I mean, this is typically what I'm looking for. And if you zoom out, this thing has been in a almost a 2-year base. So I mean, a big level to look out for is the 44s, 45 level. I think if we break that, whether it's on earnings or big news, I mean, there's no reason this thing can't go back to 60s, 70s.